Back on Jacket Sports Weekly, I'm Terrence Saprosky, and today I'm joined by Waynesburg University baseball player and close friend Corey Fischer. Corey, thanks for being on the show this week.
Thanks for having me, Tanner.
And obviously at this point, a lot of people probably know your story about everything you've been going through so far this year. So just give a quick rundown on how your diagnosis went, how you kind of discovered it, and what your schedule's been like so far.
So in the summertime I started to have like a weird, every once in a while I'd wake up and just kind of not be able to, not walk, but I'd walk with like a limp, and I just felt an irritation like my groin, and then it would go away for a month and kind of never thought anything of it for that reason. And then when we got back to school, like September, October, it started to be really consistent to the point that I could barely walk and I couldn't sleep at all. You live with me, so you remember quite a few occurrences of that. I got to the point in October that I couldn't really drive. I literally didn't sleep for probably 2 months. So after going to the trainer for a while, we thought it was maybe a labrum issue, maybe a pulled groin, something from pitching, and went finally do an x-ray from UPMC, and it showed a little shadow on my bone. And then I went and got an MRI, and it showed a 13 centimeter mass in my soft tissue and in my pelvis of my right side of my pelvis into my groin area. And so originally I thought it was lymphoma, and then it ended up being diagnosed as Ewing sarcoma, which is a rare form of bone cancer, bone and soft tissue cancer. And so, ever since end of November, early December, I received my first chemo treatment. So I go in for 5 days of inpatient chemo, so it's 5 days straight of chemo. I stay at Children's Hospital, go home for a week, get my blood the next Tuesday, and the following Tuesday after that, I go in the hospital for 2 days, and then that's my cycle. So 5 days off for a week, 2 days off for a week. And then recently, about a month ago, 2 weeks ago, I started radiation. So I have radiation 5 days a week, and then I'm still continuing my chemo treatments on top of that.
So obviously it's a very busy schedule, as you just mentioned, all the days and driving back and forth and stuff like that. So how have you been able to, because you're still in school, how have you been able to balance everything that you're going through at the hospital and driving back and forth with your schoolwork that you're still doing here?
Yeah, the teachers at Waynesburg are really awesome, so I have to thank them for that. They've been very gracious with me, which is my family and I really appreciate that, because I have one semester left, so I just wanted to graduate. So I've just been able to manage it. A lot of makeup work, a lot of kind of doing things on my own, not my own time necessarily, but not necessarily having it as structured, because I can't really show up to classes in the morning because I drive an hour and a half. Get to Children's at 8:30 every single morning, and then get radiation for about 30 minutes, and then drive an hour home, so I don't get back here until like 10:30 every morning. And on top of that, with baseball, thankfully they've all been really gracious, and I've been able to kind of keep up with it so far. So the plan is to graduate in May, and that's going well so far.
And you mentioned that you still go back and forth, and you're still a very active member of the baseball team. So where do you find your motivation to be able to handle what you're going through while still being able to participate with the baseball team?
I think as anybody who's probably been diagnosed with cancer, the one thing you want to do is try as much as possible to kind of try to keep things normal, even though you're kind of diagnosed with a situation that is not normal, especially somebody of my age. And so I think that I find the motivation just in the fact that baseball I've played since I was 5 years old, so it's kind of always been my escape, if you will, of escape from anything going on in reality. So this is kind of the biggest testament to that now. Probably my last season, other than playing in the summer, but my biggest season as a senior here. So kind of been built up for this. So it obviously stinks that this wrench has been thrown into it, but it's always been my escape. So it's kind of the biggest testament this year being that it's my escape from one of the biggest hardships of my life for sure.
And you've had some pretty cool opportunities to be on FaceTime with a couple of famous Pittsburgh athletes like Sidney Crosby, Jason Zucker, and T.J. Watt, and that led into the whole thing with your Super Bowl trip. So how was that trip to L.A., and how did you enjoy the Super Bowl?
No, that was awesome. Yeah, so that came as a complete surprise. I was able to go out there with my dad, so that was a blast. And going to the Super Bowl is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It just so happened that it worked out that it was in Los Angeles, which I'd never been there before. So wish the Steelers would have been there, but it was an amazing opportunity. Going out there for 3 days we saw a UCLA USC basketball game, which was awesome, and then the Super Bowl the next day. It was amazing. So I've definitely never experienced anything like it. So I very appreciated Children's Hospital and the Steelers for that too.
And there's been a lot of stories. You've been interviewed many times by some local news outlets. If there is anything, what's something that maybe you didn't say in those interviews that now that you have the opportunity to say it here? Is there anything that you didn't say then that you would want to say now?
I think it's just the fact that of all the support that everybody shows and gets, not only like just my family, my girlfriend, her family, my friends, the baseball team, coaches, all that. It's just the fact that you're at Children's Hospital, and it's kind of rough. The hardest thing I always tell people is the biggest delay I have on my admission days on Tuesdays is because I have to wait for a bed to be available, and that's something that kind of changes your perspective on life, is the fact that I have to wait 3 hours in a room with my mom because there's too many kids. There's too many kids that are filling a cancer floor, which is kind of one of the worst things. You have to come to reality, and then you see all the kids walking around. So I think it's just, I get blessed with the opportunities that it landed me because I think I'm a little bit older. I could do all those news stories, so I could do the interviews. They didn't have to interview parents, they had to interview me about the Super Bowl, so I kind of got picked that way, and that was really cool. But there's a lot of kids that go through a lot of stuff, so I think that all the foundations and all that stuff, it definitely doesn't, you wonder when you hear about cancer research and where that money goes. There's a lot of stuff that people do for the whole entire floor of the Children's Hospital, that whatever you can do is helping kids, which is pretty awesome.
We'll switch gears now to more of a baseball focus. First, the preseason trip down to Florida. I had the honor of going down with the team, as most people know by now, but how do you think your body physically handled that trip to Florida because of all the travel? You took the plane, not the bus down, but still had 6 games in 7 days going back and forth on the buses. So how do you think you handled that in Florida this season?
Yeah, I think that the timing for Florida actually worked out perfectly because so they do my initial 6 rounds of chemotherapy. They give you like a little break after then because they do rescans to make sure everything's kind of going in the right direction. So it landed perfectly then. And so like you said, I took the plane, which thanks to our manager, Perry, and his wife, who's been amazing throughout this whole process. They were like, you should lay on the bus for however long that was, 18 hours, and let your body handle that. So I think that was definitely beneficial for me. But yeah, I think my body handled Florida well. I think when I got home, it was more of a reality check kind of. That Teal game 2 weeks ago, I finished 5 days of chemo and pitched 2 days later, and I think my body was kind of, and radiation on top of it, definitely has its negative. It definitely has its side effects. You get tired, you get bone pain, joint pain, stuff like that. But as for the Florida trip, I thought it went a lot better than it was planned. So, I was happy with the way I felt. I was happy with the way I pitched, and I was glad we got some wins down there too.
I was going to say, you pitched very well in Florida. That one start versus Concordia and the save at the end of the trip. You've also pitched extremely well back here in Pennsylvania. So why do you think you've been so successful on the mound this season?
I think that we have a really good defense behind me, which is nice. I think that senior Tyler Woodrow, another one of our roommates, catcher, me and him are we're on a very same page with how we like to approach different batters and approach the defensive side of baseball, which that's part of the battle, as you know, is kind of the mental aspect of how to pitch and how to pitch to batters. And I think him and I have a really good relationship out there, so that definitely helps. And so far, I've just been changing speeds and hitting my spots, and my stuff's moving as for now, and I keep getting people out. So I'm rolling with it for now, and hopefully we can continue it and make a little run here towards the end of the season.
And it is a very young team, a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomore guys that are involved. Maybe not the best start to the season so far, but there's still a lot of games left to be played. But where do you see this team in the future, say 2, 3, even 4 years from now?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the best skilled-wise team, with the exception, we were talking about the other day, the COVID year we lost my sophomore year was a very good team too, but this is probably the best talented team that I've had. I mean, obviously when you don't have Mason Miller, that's tough to really come back from, but there's a lot of really young talent that we have, these freshmen, and I think that earlier in the season, we played, as you saw, we played some really good opponents in Florida, and then this conference is one of the best conferences in the region, so I mean, kind of well-rounded conference. You're going to see a lot of good pitchers, a lot of good hitters, and I think that from a pitching perspective at least, the thing I tell the young guys is it's not high school anymore where you can miss your spots, and so I think that is one adjustment you kind of have to make, which I went through it. Joe, our other good pitcher, went through it. He was younger too. It's just you learn kind of the hard way, if you will, and I think that as these guys get more experience now when they're young, I think that going forward, especially with Perry as a manager who's leading us in the right direction, I think that 2-3 years from now with this group of guys and whoever else he recruits, the sky's the limit for them. And I think that this year we could go also very far if we get things moving in the right direction because the talent's definitely there.
And last question real quick before we wrap up. You are a senior, you'll be graduating in May. What are you going to miss most about this team, and what do you personally want to leave behind for the team when you're gone?
What I want to miss most is just competing every day. I mean, even I've never complained about going to practice, if you will. I mean, sure, that's not a true statement, but mainly I never really complained about going to a practice in my life. I love baseball, and I think that anytime you get to compete at this level, which is one of the highest levels you can compete in, I think that just the camaraderie and being able to go out there every single day and just compete one-on-one battles on the mound is really something special, and I love that aspect of baseball. And one thing I'd love to leave behind is just that every time I go out there, I mean, I don't throw the hardest, I don't have the best stuff in the world, but every time I go out there, I give it my all, and I think that's something that at this level is kind of the biggest factor for guys to be successful, especially pitching, is when you get out there, just give it everything you have, and that's something that I want to leave behind with my legacy. This year, with everything I'm going through and the years past, just I gave it all every time I go out there, and nobody can say otherwise.
Well, again, thank you for joining us this week on Jacket Sports Weekly. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Everybody here on campus and around is always, of course, proud of you, of how you've been handling your situation so far. But that's all the time we have today. Come back in 2 weeks for our next episode of Jacket Sports Weekly right here on WCTV.